Welcome to Master Domaining. I'm Gene Pimentel, and in this session we're going to talk about an instant, painless method to move a domain to your buyer's account. So you've made a sale and now you need to give ownership of the domain to your buyer. The traditional way of doing this is to transfer the domain, which involves some very confusing steps, especially if your buyer has never been through this before. A domain transfer involves several email verifications from the registrar and can take several days to complete. Now this is not good because any delay can be detrimental to a sale. A buyer left waiting has time to change their mind, and you don't want this to happen, of course. You need to get ownership to the buyer instantly. Yes, there is a way to do this, and I will reveal my method below. First, let's look at a question that I often get. How long do I have to wait to sell a newly registered domain name to a buyer? Well, the short answer is you don't have to wait any time. You can sell any domain anytime without hesitation or delay. But Gene, I hear you say, don't registrars have a 60-day waiting period? Well, the fact is, although it is universal among all registrars that you must wait 60 days before it can be transferred out to a different registrar, the rule has no effect on the way we handle things. You must understand the two methods of moving a domain to a buyer. Method 1 is called a transfer. Method 2 is called a push. Please absorb the following two lines carefully and understand the difference. Domain transfer. A domain transfer is when you move a domain from one registrar to a completely different registrar. For example, from Namecheap to GoDaddy, or vice versa. Domain push. A domain push is when you move a domain name from one user account to another user account within the same registrar. The 60-day waiting period applies only to a transfer and not to a push. So once I have a buyer for one of my domain names and we've agreed upon the price, here's what I do immediately. Number 1, after payment has been received, I create a new account at the same registrar where the domain name is currently registered. Number 2, I push the sold domain name from my main account to the newly created account. And number 3, I then email the customer, giving them the username and password to that account. Done. In this way, the customer has full access to that new account and domain, so they have full ownership immediately. They just change the password to their own, and they are the happy owner of that account. Now, this is done before the subject even comes up with your buyer about how to get the domain to them. This method removes all confusion for the inexperienced buyer. They don't need to know anything about the transfer process. They own it immediately. This method also makes the sales transaction instantaneous. The buyer does not have to deal with emails and verifications in the hours or days it takes with a typical transfer. It allows me to quickly and easily complete the transaction and move on to the next without any hand-holding or teaching the customer what to do. But what if the buyer wants the domain in a different registrar? No problem. They can transfer the domain to a completely different registrar if they'd like. That's up to them and does not involve you. Do you get that? You are not involved in handling the tedious transfer process, and you don't have to lose days doing it. The buyer owns the domain name instantly, and they are free to transfer it out to a different registrar on their own. When you're selling lots of domains, doing transfers can get very cumbersome. But doing a push in the way I described above is instant and trouble-free.